Hi guys, welcome to another tutorial. Today we're going to be looking at how to access your local LAN services over the internet easily and securely. We're going to be using Caddy version 2, which is pretty awesome and pretty easy to use. And I've actually changed to using this from a bunch of other software which I no longer need. So I'm going to show you how to set this up. So first we'll just take a quick look at what you might be already running on your home network. So you might have some sort of home server device or several devices, and they will be running your services. For example, you might have a Plex media server, some sort of home automation server like Home Assistant, and maybe a cloud like Nextcloud for your files. This could also be a network attached storage or NAS. So whatever it is, you have all your devices connecting to it and you're very happy with using it on your home network to access your files. And then you also have an internet connection through a router. So now the only problem is, what if your device was not on your home network and you wanted to access your home server while you're away over the internet, perhaps at work or anywhere else? So how do you set this up? The first way some of you might be familiar with is simply to open up the ports on your router and direct them to your home server. So this way each of your services could be on a different port and you simply access them over the internet using your external IP address. For example, using these kinds of URLs and the port. The only problem with this is that, firstly, when you're on the internet, you don't know who could be listening in on your connection. It's not the same as your home network, which is more secure and isolated. So you want to be using HTTPS all the time. This provides a secure communication layer using encryption, and that prevents any eavesdropping. So that's the first problem. The second problem is your IP address might change without warning. Unless you know you have a static IP address, this could change and then all of a sudden all your applications stop working when you're outside of the network. And then thirdly, it's just kind of ugly. Like, you have to access your services through this string of numbers. It's difficult to remember them and share them with other people. So we want to find a better way. One way to improve it is to add a dynamic DNS. So instead of accessing your services through an IP address, which could change, we access it through a URL. So this might be your own domain name, or you might go to a service like DuckDNS and get a DNS server for free. And that allows you to point this URL to the IP address of your router and then run a script, or if your router supports it, change the DDNS setting to update your dynamic DNS server and make sure that the URL always points to the IP address of the router, even if it changes. So this fixes the issue of the IP address might randomly change, and you can access all your services through a nice little URL. However, you still don't have HTTPS, so it's still unsecure, and it's also kind of ugly. You're still accessing it through these individual ports, which you have to remember. Is there a better way, an even better way? Yes, so this is where Caddy comes in. So Caddy can be used as a reverse proxy. So what this means is you can install it on your home server, and then any requests coming in through a URL will be automatically encrypted and using HTTPS. And also, you don't have to open up all those ports anymore for each of your services. You only need to open up port 80 and 443, and Caddy will be listening on those two ports. And basically, if depending on the URL that's being used, the subdomain that's being used to access your server, it will automatically route the requests to the appropriate service on its individual port. So this makes it nice and tidy. You just have to use a nice clean URL to access your service. It's easy to tell someone else or share with others, and it's all using secure HTTPS automatically. So let's take a look at how some of the other features of Caddy. So just for some of you more advanced users, you might be interested in this. Some of you may have used reverse proxies, virtual hosts, or tried to even set up your own HTTPS using something like Apache or NGINX, Let's Encrypt, and you may have had to string all this together and get it working. You may even host your own websites and files through Apache or one of these other web servers. So I used to use a bunch of these different things to achieve this, but now I just use Caddy. It replaces all of these things, and it's got even more great features, and it's just a simple single binary. There's a simple single Caddyfile configuration, and it's got built-in automatic HTTPS, which is just great. You don't have to touch anything. It's just so easy. So I would highly recommend for your home server, even if you may already be using some of these things, Caddy is a really awesome alternative. So the basic steps to set this up, as I mentioned, you'll need your own domain name or a free DDNS such as DuckDNS. And I can just quickly show you what that looks like. So if you go to duckdns.org, you can see that you can sign up for this for free. And what it does is give you a URL with your own subdomain. So it could be jackshouse.duckdns.org. And then you can use that to point to your server's IP address. And like I mentioned, you need to have a script which will automatically update your DuckDNS to make sure it points to your IP address if it changes. And there's several different ways you can do that. As I mentioned, you could either install it on your router if it's supported, or perhaps your router supports one of these standards. Failing all that, as a last resort, I would just take these steps here to set it up as a Linux cron job. So that's a job that runs in the background periodically. It's fairly easy to set up. Just follow these instructions and do that. And then there's a bunch of other methods. If you have a Raspberry Pi or any of these other things, you can choose the appropriate method to set up that automatic updating script. So once you've set that up, you need to forward the ports, and you only need to forward port 80 and port 443 normally, because Caddy does the redirecting to your internal ports, and you only need these two for normal functionality. So to do that, you'll need to go into your own router and configure the router specifically to point these ports to the internal IP address of your server on the network. There's plenty of tutorials that'll show you how to do this. Just look at port forwarding, Google that, and you should be able to easily change those settings in a few seconds on your router. And then we're going to look at installing Caddy on your server. It's fairly straightforward, and then configuring it. So once you've done the first two steps, you can look at installing Caddy by running these few commands. You can, this is specifically for Ubuntu server. That's what I use. Basically, you just add the repository to your sources, do an update of apt, and then do the install. If you are not using Ubuntu, you'll be able to find instructions on Caddy, which are pretty well written, depending on which method you want to use. You could use Docker, the Ubuntu method, which is what I used, and several other methods. So take a look at that. And once you have it installed,
You then need to set up Caddy to route requests to your various services. So here's an example of a Caddyfile. What you want to do is first make sure you have Caddy running as a system service, and this is pretty easy to do. You just type in this command here, sudo systemctl start Caddy, and then once you have that started, you'll be able to edit the config file. So type in sudo nano /etc/caddy/caddyfile. So this is the global Caddy file. You can also make multiple local Caddy files and add them if you like, but I like to keep it simple, just have one single file that has all the settings. And so in that file, you should enter the URLs of the services that you want to access, and all of these will be accessed through HTTPS, which is port 443. So just enter for each of your services that URL, and then we want to set up a reverse proxy to point to the local service. So this is basically the URL that you would use to access the service on your local network. In all of the cases, this would be the IP address of the local machine, or if it's the same machine that Caddy is already running on, you can just type localhost. So in this case, I have a Nextcloud running on the same computer as the Caddy, and that is on port 81. And then I also have a Home Assistant server supervised version running on a different device, and that has a IP address here and a port. So that will automatically route requests from this URL to this server. And then finally, once you have changed the settings files and saved it, you can reload the service using sudo systemctl reload Caddy, and that should work. And then you'll be able to go to your web browser. You can test this out with your phone. Just disconnect your phone from the local Wi-Fi, and so it's running on 4G, and then just type in this URL and test those out. Then you'll be able to access your services from anywhere you have an internet connection, easily and securely. So I hope you like that tutorial. If you want to know more about the features of Caddy, it's pretty awesome. Just using it as a reverse proxy, it's nice and easy, but it's got a whole lot of other features in there. It's doing a lot in the background as well to make HTTPS work seamlessly. Normally you would have to manage your certificates, update them, and set all this up, but it's doing that all automatically, which is awesome. Some of the more advanced users may want to look at the other features it provides, and that includes lots of different configuration options, including being able to manipulate the headers and some really good control over the requests that you would normally find in a reverse proxy. You can also very quickly host a bunch of static files very easily with one command. It's pretty awesome documentation on here as well. As I mentioned, TLS, so it does all this automatically, the HTTPS. And finally, it's got a pretty awesome HTTP server, as I mentioned. You can quickly host a directory full of files, share them with anyone. It can even render Markdown or any static content. And it also has some extensibility, so you can create extensions which allow you to host PHP and other types of dynamic websites. So there you go, and I hope you enjoyed that tutorial. If you'd like to see more, please like and subscribe, and I'll see you on the next one. Thanks a lot.